Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 4 of Be My Guest. I'm surprised I've made it this far. Not really, but I've had some really fun times doing this, so I'm looking forward to continuing it. We have a great guest on today. He is Matt Rigoli, somebody I used to work with, and we're going to get into that. Now, I'm going to warn you guys. Matt's an accounting person. I know. Everybody here, if you're not a GM or you're not in accounting yourself, you hate accountants because they're the ones cutting your budgets. I know. Episode 1 was an accounting person too, but listen, as you saw with Haroon and as you're going to see with Matt, they're going to cut your budget, but they're going to have a beer with you afterwards. So it's not so bad. So I'm going to bring him in because he's worked through the pandemic. He works for one of the major hotels in the city. So, I mean, I'm talking about one of the premier spots. And he's had the responsibility of staying on staff the entire time and kind of figuring out how to work the numbers through this. He's taken on some responsibilities that he didn't previously had due to, staff cuts, as everybody has. And I wanted to kind of have him on to get the perspective of someone who has worked the entire way through, because all too often, we focus on people that aren't working like myself and forget that the people that are still working, even though they are grateful for their positions, I don't think anybody is ungrateful for being able to continue to work. There is a lot of stress that comes with that. So let's just pop Matt on right away. We'll get started here. But before we do that, just a reminder, if you see this and you want to be my guest, come on my show and talk about your experience through COVID from a hospitality perspective, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. The link's right at the bottom. If you're not watching, it's linkedin.com/in/D Mignano. That's DMIGNANO. I want this to be an open forum. There's nobody that's not allowed to come on. So come on, let's tell our stories and really connect with some other people. But without further ado, Mr. Rigoli, how are you today, my friend?
What's going on, Dave? How are you?
Good, man. Appreciate you taking the time. So as I kind of said in the open, Matt and I work together at another property outside of the city. And even though that was about 2 years ago now, we've stayed friends throughout. At the time I was working front office ops. Matt was, again, in accounting. So, we stayed friends throughout. We stayed in contact. Luckily, we both ended up working at different places within the city, and we're able to kind of hang out. And, that's really the relationships that you can develop within hotels. And we talked about that with Sarah back on episode number 2. But, one of the challenges of this is you kind of lose those relationships you build sometimes, because people you work with every day, people you see every day, you build those relationships. In many hotels, you become family. You kind of lose that, and those people are really suffering. So I'm glad we were able to stay in contact throughout all of this, and I appreciate you being my guest today. So we'll start off really, Matt, just give me kind of a quick background of who you are. I know you've moved up through the professional ranks within that accounting side.
Mm-hmm.
So give us kind of some details who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for having me on this. I'm glad we can make it work. I know we've been bouncing around different times, and I completely agree with you on the whole maintaining the relationship and building another family, work family, if you so like through that. And it's been difficult to keep in touch, obviously, in these times, but it's something that's extremely important. And I also think it's one of those things where you never actually, you always pick up right where you left off, no matter, as long as those relationships are there. A little bit about myself. It's funny, I actually come more from a sports background than anything in my life, which is actually what kind of enabled me to get into hotels. And it's something I never truly thought about growing up, being in hotels. But as it was, played baseball growing up, traveled a lot for sports, baseball, hockey, basketball, pretty much everything. And then, staying in hotels everywhere on the road with my dad and my family and whatnot. At one point, my father was working somewhere and he didn't want to move down there, so he actually just lived in the hotel. He was actually in the Philadelphia area, and the family went there on the weekends and would come back home on the weekdays because we were still in school and young, but we had basically lived in the hotel for almost 2 years. But besides that, like I said, I actually got the chance to play in the minor leagues, which I miss dearly, but I always mention it because it's something that's part of my past, a big part of my past, and I enjoyed it. But after that, you play in the summer, you have 6 months, 8 months where you're working and playing, and then that off season comes and you didn't know what to do. So I actually got a job at the front desk at a hotel in my neighborhood, and my parents, right around the corner from my parents' house, and started there. And from there, as I was playing, I would come back and work in the off season. And from there, I kind of was like, you know what, the baseball thing might not work out. Let me see what's going to happen next. And I kind of just, I had the accounting and finance background, and I started applying for jobs within the company from there, and worked my way through the ranks from an accounting assistant to a senior accounting assistant to an assistant director to a senior assistant director, and just working my way through the ranks. And each time I went to a bigger property, a bigger hotel, a more revenue generating hotel, and found myself in the city, and I absolutely love it. Can't go wrong with that.
No, and we're right around the same age. I think you're 87 as well, right? You're born in 87?
I'm 85.
85. Okay, so we're still right around the same age. And as we were progressing our careers, we were fortunate enough to really be moving up the ranks within this uptrend, right? It's been a 10-year uptrend. Everybody knows it's been one of the longest up cycles that we've ever had. And obviously, unfortunately, even though everybody expected it to come down, it crashed about as fast, right?
Absolutely.
So a lot of our progression was hard work, but was also potentially because there were so many open jobs. We could move around pretty quick, and that not just us, but a lot of people our age within the industry can move up really quickly. Everything kind of comes to a crash, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're someone, thankfully, because of your position and because of your hotel being such a influential hotel in Manhattan, was able to keep your spot. So what was kind of the first thing you thought of as this is all taking place back in March and you see everything start to collapse? What was the first thing that kind of ran through your mind?
Well, just to touch base on that idea of the collapse, and you're right, we were on a 10-year trend. Things are kind of like 7 years, or usually there's a cycle and things reset, and we were pushing the envelope. Not just our industry. I think our industry was doing that. I do think you saw it in the travel industry as a whole, airlines and things like that, where you kind of like saw prices for tickets, for a 2-hour flight, $600 range, and you're like, well, this is ridiculous. So I mean, it was kind of getting on all levels, and the quote unquote golden age, I guess you can call it, for the hospitality. I don't even know what to call about that, but it's one of those things where you were waiting for something to kind of happen and reset everything. Not to this level, not to this extent. This was something that was, it's devastating for on a lot of levels. Again, people lost a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people are on furlough. A lot of people are laid off, temporary layoffs, all of that, which is very difficult. So and a lot of us have taken reduced work weeks, taking pay cuts to maintain. I know I am in the accounting industry where, people have said to me, why don't you look somewhere else and kind of leave the company? And for me, it's one of those things where there's very few things I can see myself doing. And I enjoy this business. I enjoy the hospitality industry. I enjoy the people side of it just as much as I enjoy the financial side of it. As quote unquote seeing this coming, I don't want to sit there and say that I knew, but I had this intuition personally back in March, early March, when like you started hearing it on the news, you started seeing everything on the news, and I feel as if a lot of it was being downplayed, especially for this country. And I just personally kept saying to everybody, if this gets to New York, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. And I kept saying that to people, and I don't know if people like didn't understand what it would do exactly, or what they didn't see it. But I kept saying, I was like, I just remember being on a subway and being crammed into a subway with a million people in each cart, and you're like, you're sitting there going like, if somebody sneezes, you're like, oh, that's gross. But like at the same time, like you're just in that proximity, you get used to that lifestyle and you get used to living like that, which is fine. But I mean, I feel as if this was being downplayed by everyone, every sector, no matter who it was. It was one of those things where you saw this tidal wave coming, and you're like, that's not a wave, and you're like,
I think a lot of it wasn't here, right? Like, and I remember back in probably December, my GM reached out and said, this is back when it was mostly in Asian countries, and said, is this going to impact us at all? And my response was no, because my hotel didn't really have an Asian base. I said the only way it's really going to impact us is if the Chinese market stops traveling to Midtown, and then Midtown starts to suck up the leisure demand on the weekends that we typically have. never at that time did I think it was going to be coming here. And then you really still didn't think, especially because January was so good in Manhattan, right? February was tremendous. It all started in March. And the challenge is that even though it's all started in March, and that's when cases started to get reported, and a lot of this snowball started to roll, even though that's when it started to become to the national news stream, it was already here, right?
Absolutely.
It was here definitely in January. Definitely in February, most likely in January. So that snowball had started long before we knew it.
Absolutely.
So this is happening, and March is and I'm a revenue person, so I'm seeing the first few days of March, hundreds of thousands of dollars getting taken off the books every day for March and April. You're at a bigger hotel, so I'm sure it was larger than that, as you guys lost. So accounting is obviously very responsible for keeping your GOP positive, finding unique ways to survive this. And I'm sure those conversations started early on. What are we going to do? So what was going into your mindset as you're kind of going through the numbers, and it gets to that point where unfortunately there are going to have to start being some furloughs and layoffs?
I mean, so to touch on your point about the seeing the revenue decline really rapidly, we did. I mean, it was one of those things where at first we started this whole COVID tracking revenue tracker where it's like, oh, what are we losing? Because at first, even when it was here, people thought, okay, this will be like a month or two, and we'll figure it out from there and go. And then it was like, look, this way that we can report against it. And then it was like, this is going to be more than a month. This is going to be 2 months. This is going to be, and I'll be the first one to say that even when it first started, I kind of, again, related it to sports, like just being like a younger kid in high school practicing in the winter time, where you're sitting there going to the batting cages in December and January, and you're like, there's snow on the ground. I'm a Northeast kid. Why am I doing this? But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and all of a sudden it's late February, March, and you're playing ball. So it's like, so when this started happening in March, I kind of sat there and I tried to be upbeat about it, saying, all right, this is what's gonna happen. This is what we have to do now. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully we can get a little brighter. But I mean, and obviously I still think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a matter of just getting through it. But working through the numbers, and you say like trying to keep the GOP positive, and I agree with that. It's been difficult, and I'll be completely honest. It's hard to do that in these scenarios, and you being in the business know that GOP is not always going to be positive, no matter how much money you take at the top, no matter how much revenue there is. It's not always going to be positive. And working through that, you just have to think outside the box. It's one of those things where it's, okay, this is what we have to do now. How do we save a couple extra $1,000, or how do we, do we turn off more lights? Is there any more lights that we can turn off to save on the utility bill? Like just anything, you're doing anything you can. And, when you know that it's going to get to more drastic measures, it's one of those things where you do take it, you take it to heart. You don't take it personally. You take it to heart, because you again, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show about family and your work family, and meeting those people. You work with people side by side every day, and you figure things out together. And then all of a sudden you're standing there alone. Sometimes you're like, I really wish I could just bounce these ideas off somebody.
So again, and you being someone who, regardless of department, you're one of the most friendly hotel people I've ever met. Again, one of the reasons why we're still
thanks, man. I appreciate
friends. But so I can easily and definitely see, as you're kind of making these cuts, or at least preparing to have to make these decisions, and becoming very mentally strenuous on you. And I understand you're not having the conversations directly with the people that are being affected. You're not the person calling them and saying that we're going to be transitioning to furlough or transitioning to layoff and so forth. But how do you go home, and kind of separate that? As you said, it's not something you want to take personally, but you take it to heart. How can you kind of separate that so that you're still understanding, I have a job to do, and this is the right thing, but it sucks.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And, and not to say that I was the one that delivered the whole news, but I didn't shy away from it when I talked to anybody about it. I think, as anybody, if you want to be a leader, you have to take the good times with the bad, and you have to sit there and be able to look somebody in the face and tell them, this is what we have to do for now. I think that phrase is something that helps me a lot. The idea of quote unquote for now. I know myself personally, personally, I struggle with the idea of anything being final, whether that be a relationship, a friendship, a job, anything like that. I think anybody, it's a fear of the unknown, but it's also a fear of anything, quote unquote, being finite and the finality of something. So I found not only in my personal life, but in my professional life, the phrase "for now," if I tack that on to the end of any sentence, that helps me, get through the day. And, even though I am thankful and grateful every day that I am still working, I not only do I take it to heart, but I view it as I got to do this. What I have to do right now, I have to do it for now. I don't have to do this forever. This is not going to be forever. It's a for now type deal. And the way I look at it is that I do it for now for my team. I view it as I'm doing this to get back my team. I'm doing this to get back, to make that phone call. We need you back. We can bring you back. I want to have that person back. Like you said, it is difficult. This weighed on my mind tremendously. And being one of the ones that had been there for a longer, not me personally, but one of the senior leaders that had been at this hotel, my hotel, for as long as I had been, I viewed it as my team. I need to bring my team back. I want my team back. And I viewed it as I got to do what I have to do for now to make ends meet, and for now to get my teammates back.
No, I mean, you're 100% on, right? And that's really where, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is because you have that, again, a lot of us lost our positions, but for the ones that didn't, you're kind of in this conundrum where I'm sure you're stressing about your position because you still don't know what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
You're making these tough calls, and you still have to have the pressure of performing on, right? And from an accounting standpoint, especially, and I don't know this, but just seeing how Haroon was back on episode 1, was working as this whole thing came, trying to crunch the numbers, trying to find any way, and really a lot of pressure from corporate on these forecasts and on figuring out these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going through all this while also, I mean, I guess you should tell me first, did you feel there to be added pressure as this was coming for your role? Even though it may not be the same role, was there just more required of you?
There's absolutely more required of me. I've taken on things that I personally haven't done in the past, and I was like, if I can learn it. A friend of mine who I used to work with, who is currently in the same boat as temporary layoff, furloughed, always used to say FIO, and I like that phrase. Is figure it out. FIO, figure it out. And so you just kind of have to do that. As far as pressure, for me, I took it as it was part of the job, and you have to just kind of do what you have to do. And the same thing as in a personal life or a personal situation, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much I can forecast. There's only so much I can see coming. There's only so much I can rub the crystal ball and tell myself what's going on. But at the same time, there's things I worry about, the things I can control, and I can control my work ethic. I can control how many hours I put in. I can control the work that I put forth, and I can control the numbers that I know are working or not working, and like what I'm putting forth, and control my defending of what I'm putting forward. But sometimes if there's things that you can't control or you can't truly worry about, you can't sit there and stress over it because it's out of your control. Worry about the things you can control and focus on that, and that's a major part of it as well. So anything that I can touch and do and physically impact, I'm going to focus on.
So how do you do that, right? Because it's easy for us to sit here and talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Certainly on a day-by-day basis, I'm sure it's harder on some days than others.
Absolutely.
So what do you do on those harder days to remind yourself of that?
It's a good question, because it is one of those things, like, take it a day at a time. Again, I'll relate it back to sports and playing. Like, you can't let one disappointment or one bad thing continue. It's a snowball effect, right? So like if I go up in my first at bat and I strike out miserably, look at 3 pitches and I didn't even get the bat off my shoulder. Yeah, so am I. There's a reason I didn't make it in baseball. But I mean, it's that kind of outlook, it's that kind of approach, right? I can't let that first at bat affect my next at bat. And same vein, if I go up there my second at bat and I have another awful at bat, or I strike out, or I ground out, or I hit into a double play, or I miss a perfect pitch down the middle, and I pop up 1,000 feet in the air. I could have a day where I go 0 for 4 or 0 for 5 and have a golden sombrero 5 strikeout for the 4 strikeouts and then get a 5th one. I have no idea. Like, you could have a terrible day, but at the same time, you can't let it affect the next day, right? So there are those bad days. You just kind of have to take a shower and forget the game, forget the day, walk away from it for a little bit. Personally, I do find it very helpful to be physical. I enjoy working out. I try to work out on a daily basis. That helps clear my mind. That helps me kind of forget the day if it was a bad one. But in the same vein, you can't get too high, you can't get too low, right? You can't go 4 for 4 and then think you're going to do that the next day. You can't have a great day at work and think the next day is going to be perfect. That's not how it's going to be. I mean, do you have those days in a row? Yeah. Like, this goes back to the same kind of vein where we were riding that wave of the 10 years of, kind of a great industry. And then all of a sudden it's like, it came crashing down. And it's the same kind of vein. You just have to stay even keel. So my part of me is definitely a daily workout routine. Some people are religious, some people are not. I tend to be on more of the religious side, so I do have a daily prayer, a reflection. I find that very peaceful for myself. I think people have their own different methods of that as well. Meditation, anything like that. You always, despite how bad the day's going or good the day's going, you have to take time for yourself and do something that helps you wipe the slate clean on a daily basis.
So how do you kind of find that balance? Because you talked about, obviously your role already is difficult enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about taking on responsibilities you've never had before,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to learn as you go, and you still have to make it proper, right? You still have to do it right as you're figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
So with these additional responsibilities, how do you find time to have that balance between your work life and your personal life?
So it's funny that you say something like that, because there's a story, I think I actually heard it one time. I had to be at church, and it was about the idea of something being full and finding the balance and finding time, right? And it was, you take a glass, you imagine a glass jar, and that you fill that glass jar up with rocks, right? You fill it up with rocks to the top, and then you ask somebody, is that full? Most people say, yes, that's full. That glass is full. Well, then you sit there and you take a bag of sand, and then you fill up the sands, and the sand is small enough to fit in between the gaps of air in this glass that fit in, and that fills in the spots in between the rocks. So now you look at it and you have a glass full of rocks and sand, and then you look at somebody and goes, is it full? And then you go, yeah, you know what? I didn't think about that, but now it's full. But then the guy takes a glass of water and then you pour the water into there, and the water fills up the air spaces in between the sand, the grain of sand. So and then you go, now it's full, right? And, I always think about something like that whenever people say they don't have the time, or they're not working the time, or they're running out of time. I think you prioritize. Obviously, you make the things that are extremely important to you a priority, and you find the time to do that because they're important to you. But it's a big thing to. If you don't think you have time, I guarantee you there's a little time in your day to figure that out. Just whether it be a small little like a drive, you have 15 minutes to drive, you have 15 minutes to call a friend, safely, of course, obviously. But I mean, just like little things like that, you can always try to figure out when to make time. It's about figuring that out.
No, that's great, and that's great advice. I mean, because I think all of us, even pre-COVID, feel like that times where you just have so much going on. I know from a personal perspective, even during COVID, where I haven't been working, I have my 2 children. We're doing virtual learning. I'm working on no vacancy. I'm trying to develop this. I have other things I'm doing to try and get by. So, there's been days where I'm like, I look back and I'm like, I've been just going wire to wire from 6 a.m. to 12 a.m., every day. And I don't have a second to breathe to do anything. And something that one of the hosts of no vacancy say is you still have to find time for yourself, and making that concerted effort, even if, like you said, it's just 10 minutes, 15 minutes to reset is so important, because there's so much negativity out there already.
100%.
Then top of that, you put COVID, you put, the election cycle that we just went through, which is very strenuous for a lot of people, and it's going to continue to be strenuous as this whole thing plays out as we get to January 20th. Jobs, families, schools. I mean, there's just so much on people's plates that really eat at you that it's probably more important than ever to find that time. And I like that the fact that you mentioned calling a friend, because a lot of times people don't want to do that to talk about their negative issues, right? Maybe you have one or two close friends you can do that with, but it's not something that is going to happen all the time for a lot of people, I feel. So that kind of will relate to my next question. At the hotel, again, with your staff and every hotel staff being trimmed down pretty significantly, and you being a leader in your own right, who do you turn to, or how can you turn? What's the source you turn to within the hotel to look to for advice, or look to for that positive energy in this continuing negative trend?
I mean, that goes back to even what I was mentioning earlier. I mean, whether people see that or not, and it's something they don't see. The people that are still working, we're all working towards a common goal of getting back to some kind of normalcy, right? So I'm lucky enough that my general manager and my hotel manager have been a tremendous influence on myself. They're very positive outlooks on everything. They find the silver lining in a lot of things that they do, and a lot of things that we're doing at the hotel. I've also been lucky enough to have a director above me who's been kind of split between a couple of hotels, helping out with a bunch of different people who again is the same way, has that kind of positive vision and working towards the common goal of getting to normalcy and being in a place where I want to say but we know that's going to take some time now. But yeah, to get to the place where we were and to get back to a position of good tidings, I guess is I want to say.
Normalcy.
Normalcy. I'm at the point now where I hate that word because you hear it all the time. Yeah, well, exactly. What is normal now? But I mean, but absolutely. I'm lucky enough to have those people as part of my direct reporting line and those people to talk to and interact with when I need it. And absolutely, that's important to have as well.
So going the other way now, as a leader, how are you able to promote that positive energy to people that are under you, whether it be direct reports or line level staff in other departments that you're interacting with? How can you stay positive for them when you're kind of going through all this?
I think that's a good point, and we actually discussed this as a group before. Is like, what are the things you can do? I think my team, who is still with me working, and the people that are temporarily off, I think we've done a pretty good job of maintaining contact with them and keeping them in the loop to make them feel like they aren't forgotten, because they aren't. They're definitely on our minds every day, whether it be doing things that we would work with them or ask them to do for us when they were there, or it's just being able to say, what, I can't wait to see you again. I miss you. I have no problem telling somebody who I am the quote unquote direct report. I miss you. I miss having you around. I miss you in the office. I miss that. And I think that goes a long way. I think, being able to pick up I called one of my associates before, and I called her up and I said, I wish I was calling with good news and saying, that we're bringing you back right now. But honest to God, I just haven't talked to you in a little bit, and I wanted to give you a call to see how things were. And she was shocked. She was appreciative of it. But it's those little things. And I think I'm also a big component of, you get back, I guess, karma in a sense. You get back what you put in and what you put out, and what kind of energy you put out there into the universe. If I was walking around all pessimistic, like this is never going to happen, then I feel like that I'm feeling self-fulfilling prophecies. Yeah. If I put that much negative energy out there, that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get negative back. And I'm just not a negative person. And I don't think I've ever been told that I was. Yes. Can I get down? Do I have my days where I'm like, screw this? Absolutely. Right. Who doesn't? But I mean, for the most part, I think if you get positive, you get positive. If you put out positive vibes into the world, they're going to come back. There's no set timeline on when that happens, but I think it does ultimately eventually come back.
I couldn't agree more. And again, we're all going through tough situations, and your mindset towards those situations is a large part of the game, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the situation's not going to change. And I'll just use myself as an example. There's times where I'm in a bad mood and something will happen, something small, something stupid. You know, the restaurant got my food order wrong, right? And most days it's not a big deal. I just go back and I just get it fixed and it's not an issue. But on those specific days, it's like someone just burned down my house. Like I'm just upset and it ruins the whole meal, right?
No,
And that's
absolutely.
not because the meal was wrong. It's not because a mistake was made. It's because my mindset towards the day or towards whatever's happening has corrupted that simple thing into becoming something major.
No,
And even though it's not easy to do, we all have to remember, myself included, that even a negative thing will be less negative or less impactful if we just try to find the positive in that. So brings me to my next question for you then.
mhm.
What are some of the positives you found out of this whole COVID thing?
Well, I mean, I think the other thing, just to touch base and go back to what I said earlier about that whole phrase, the "for now" thing. No matter how bad your day is going, no matter how bad it gets, it's bad for now. And that again, that's something that just helped me move forward. Some of the positives, again, it is looking for the silver linings, but I personally, I have learned a tremendous amount. There were things that I took for granted of having that person there that knew how to do it, just to get it off my plate and help me out. Um, I took that for granted to say, okay, if they know how to do it, I don't have to worry about it. But then it's like, okay, now it's on my plate. I have to I have to go ahead and do this and learn this. Another positive is I've always been told personally, because I mean, and you know myself, my personality, I do like to have. I'm one of those type of people that like to have fun at work.
Yes.
I view it as that. You know what? You spend so much time there. Why would you want to go to a place you hate going to? So I'm the type of person to have fun at work, but it's also been a knock on myself, very much so, to the point where people always, do I take anything seriously? Do I take things seriously? And so a positive that I can say for myself is, I was always critiqued on not having a quote unquote executive presence sometimes, in the sense that because people had always viewed me as somebody who likes to have fun, that I couldn't take things seriously. But I've always prided myself in being able to know a situation and know when I can be serious and when I can have fun. But I think that aspect of my ability to do that has been able to come through in this time period, where people can see that I do have an executive presence when I need to. And I think that's a positive for myself, for my own personal growth and my own career path, because again, that was something that's been mentioned to me in the past, and it's something I've been working with, and it's a crutch of mine, because of my personality, because of my outgoingness. But I think with this, I've been forced to step up and say, hey, I am here in the room, and I do have thoughts, and I do have an opinion, and I do have, a presence that isn't just fun and jokes and laughs all the time. So I think that's the part.
And I find that funny you say that because yes, I mean we've worked together for I think it was about a year or so, and obviously, like we said, we've stayed in contact after that. You are one of the most just genuinely, I won't say laid back, but genuinely funny people, and genuinely this person that just wants to enjoy themselves and bring joy to other people, regardless of what's going on. And listen, I've seen Matt work. Matt works extremely hard, but he does it and I won't say a positive way, but in a lightful way, right? So it's interesting to hear that feedback that you're getting, that you're not quote unquote executive level, because I think that that's also how we're transitioning to being more open and a friendly type of corporate world per se. But what I really took away from that was what you're talking about, which is the growth, right? And being able to use this time to reassess and kind of reevaluate yourself and use it as a time to work on that. Because often too many times in our day-to-day lives and when we're all working and things are going a mile a minute, we become very singular focused, right? We don't have that ability to step back and reassess because we just are going a mile a minute on so many different things. And I've been able to use this time to reassess a lot of stuff on my personal level, on my personal self, and try to use this time to kind of make myself a better person both for myself and for my family, and try to understand myself better. So hopefully people that have been on either side of this coin, working or not working, you've been able to kind of take that time and use it to I won't say refine yourself, but just kind of understand yourself better
Mhm.
as we do come out of this, because that's really going to set you up. I think, I would hope to think at least, set you up
Mhm.
for maybe a more positive life moving forward, something you're going to be a little bit happier with. Maybe you realize you don't like working in hotels
No,
and you want to do something else, right? That's very possible. I mean, a lot of people are leaving the industry because of that.
100%.
And, or you find out within the hotels, okay, well, I really, I in my hotel career, I've moved from front desk to housekeeping to ops over to marketing because that's where I ended up needing to be, or sales. And you know what? As I revisit, maybe I want to go back into operations. So this is definitely an opportunity for you to make a transition in your life. If you find that, maybe you don't. Maybe you just think that everything is great. And that's perfect. I hope to God you do. So
No, same. I actually have a couple of friends, that they're in that position that now they're like, you know what, I enjoyed my time in the industry, but I kind of always wanted to teach. I think I might go back to school to teach.
yeah,
I think I might
yeah,
go back to school. Like I had a medical. I was interested in medical before, and now this is kind of making me want to be involved in the medical field. And they're thinking about going back to school to go for that aspect of
yeah. I mean, I said when this whole thing was starting that this is going to be the biggest reset within the industry, where people are going to
100%.
shuffle around.
Yeah.
Cruises are going to go to hotels. Hotels are going to go to airlines. Airlines are going to go to cruises.
Mm-hmm.
Never did I think this would be a great opportunity for all of us to reset ourselves.
That's a great.
And
It's a great point. But the industry itself, though, is it's kind of as if we're starting over, and it's like, what is this? It's a hotel. What is a hotel?
those people stay here.
Yeah,
They
why are
come
there
here
so
they
many
come here to spend time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting. What is
But
exploring?
but Matt, I mean, we're coming up on time here, but you have been a tremendous guest, and I really thank you for kind of bringing that positive energy to that you bring every day to work and every day to your life to the show, because I think you had a lot of great points of finding that positive energy in the darkness. And um,
I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you again for the kind words. I mean, it's good to hear. It's good to hear.
yeah, it makes you feel good.
I
It makes you feel good to get complimented,
right?
right?
Absolutely, and I think this is a great venture that you're taking on. You told me about it, and I was like, "That's a great idea." I love the phrase "be my guest." Gives me a little Disney Beauty and the Beast vibe, but I like it. I'm all right with a little Beast and Belle action
That
going on.
could be because my 8-year-old daughter watches it all the time.
Oh, there you go. Hey, you just kind of hear it every day.
Inspiration from an 8-year-old. I'll take it. Matt,
Nothing wrong
appreciate
with
it, buddy. Hey, listen, real quick. If anybody wants to find you, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, which is probably an easy way to find me. I would give out my personal email, but I mean, I'm not out there too much. But I mean, my emails are on there on LinkedIn, so you can go ahead and shoot me an email if you'd like. But yeah, why not?
Matt, really appreciate you, but thanks so much for your time today.
No, absolutely, appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, wow, I mean, really, that's a great mindset there from someone who is dealing with a lot of stress, who's dealing with the pressure of finding the money as best you can to keep the hotel operating at all, much less getting it back to a point where they can bring people back. And that mindset of just being positive, trying to find the light within the darkness. I loved the idea of not letting one day bleed into the next, good or bad, right? Let's just say you have a bad day. Don't let that if you have a bad Monday, don't make that make a bad Tuesday. Don't let the bad Tuesday then roll into a bad Wednesday. And all of a sudden you're having a bad week versus a bad day. And you obviously can break that down. You can do it by hour, do it by half an hour, but it's a great mindset and something to really remember. And I think that will change a lot of outlooks for people that are, I won't say struggling, but do find that continuous negative streak, because it is very easy to find negativity in today's world, unfortunately. So hopefully this episode brought you a little bit of positivity. Again, I would love to have anybody else be my guest that wants to join. Thank you, Matt, for being my guest. Again, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to join the show, linkedin.com/IN/DMIGNANO. We're going to be back next week with another great episode. Looking forward to that. And you can always find us on iTunes, Spotify, if you can't check out the video recording. Otherwise, we will be back in a week. And thank you all for being my guests.